Oh, I had to take some deep breaths before starting today's episode. So let's see how we go. Welcome back. G'day. I'm Hayley. This is the Super Freak podcast. And once again, I'm answering a question. In this episode, we're going to explore the challenges for entrepreneurs, the challenges we face when life throws heavy curveballs like grief, illness, family emergencies, and learn how to keep your business afloat while honoring what matters most, like taking time to grieve, time to heal, time to be with loved ones. So this is a bit of a mammoth episode, but I had so much to say. So once again, this question came from an anonymous listener. Thank you so much for bringing your questions. I want to remind you that you can ask me a question on the podcast page on my website. Or you can find the podcast highlight in my Instagram and you can ask me a question and it's completely anonymous, and I'm loving the questions that come through. So this one is, what happens when life happens? As in when the business is essentially you and there's no team to cover you when life throws you the heavy things like grief, illness, family emergencies, heartbreak. How do we keep our head on straight and keep the business afloat while still honoring those things that matter most? Taking time to grieve, to be with a sick family member, to heal, to help a loved one. This is what we're going to be talking about today. So this one feels very, very close to my heart. I read the question and went, yep, because this year I've been going through it myself. So I'm going to try not to cry when I say this, but this year my whole family has kind of gone through this. We had a tragedy in my family back in January. And it feels like the world has stopped. But ever since, it was just 6 months after losing our grandfather. So, and you can hear how close to the surface it always is, right? So it's been a year, almost to the day, of some really, really big, heavy stuff for my family, especially those who lost their dad and their husband. So I'm just going to keep pausing so I can actually get this episode out for you. But I have so much to say and so much to share on how to do this, because I started my business when I had pretty severe chronic illness. I was housebound for almost about 2 years, back from 2008 to 2010. I wasn't completely housebound, but I had chronic fatigue. I was really sick. And that's when I started my business. So I guess it's a unique way that I come from actually running a business in the first place. But yeah, this question is just really real for me right now. So it feels like a very poignant time to be answering the question. So let's dive in. I'm going to cover probably about 6 major things to keep in consideration when you are going through something like this. And I'll give you tips in between. And of course, you are always welcome to continue the conversation with me. I love hearing from you and how this helps you. And if you have something else to share, you can always comment under the podcast as well. Okay, so let's dive in. The first thing is, we need to recognize the impact of life events. So often we set goals with this idea that because I've set the goal, or because I've signed up for this mentorship, or because I've started my business now, nothing is allowed to go wrong. And that's just not how life works. We actually have to, like, the unexpected emergencies are actually guaranteed. They will happen. It might not be a huge, huge, huge tragedy. It might be that you need to get tooth surgery or something, and it's unexpected. When you have your own business and you are the business, even little things can really disrupt the flow of what to do. So you have to treat yourself like the golden goose. Anything can disrupt a solo entrepreneur's business if it's outside of what you have allowed for things to happen. And I'm going to get to some practical tips for how you can avoid it disrupting things, because it doesn't have to disrupt things, but it can if you haven't set yourself up properly. And if you're currently going through it and you haven't set yourself up properly, I've got some advice and some tips for you as well. So keep listening. But I want to give you a real understanding, like the impact of life events can be so very distracting for us, and we need to have intentional time to be able to deal with those things. Like when you're going through grief, you don't have the capacity for things you think you should, because you're basing what you think you can do off what you could do before the thing happened. And you might have like poor memory or brain fog or tiredness or feeling triggered by things really unexpectedly. You know, when you're going through a heartbreak, it's the same. It's a kind of grief. when you have to go through a random surgery, like you might have downtime, you might be like drugged up after the surgery, you might not be able to do things. And I think a lot of the time, I don't know, it's kind of romanticized, like nothing ever goes wrong. We just don't see it anywhere. And granted, people don't want to necessarily share all the things that go wrong, but we actually have to not just hope it doesn't happen, but count on the fact that it happens. And one thing I'm very proud of in my work is not only do I allow that for myself, things to go wrong, I allow it very graciously for my clients. And in the programs that I run, we know things are going to happen. So we count on that, and there is space for that to be dealt with inside of our work. So I have clients who have been through major grief that has changed the shape of their heart forever, and they still deal with every day. Clients who are going through chronic illness, clients who have children with extra needs, and it can be like really difficult to think that you can run a business while these things are happening. You absolutely can, but we've got to open up our minds about how things can happen as well. It doesn't have to stop your life, but it will potentially change your life, change what you have the capacity for, change what you even want to do, maybe for a while, maybe forever. And I have to say, I actually started my business partly for this reason. I was very much in love with someone who had terminal cancer, and it was motivation because I knew that working in my interior architecture job, which I love, I loved it sometimes, but I didn't love the hours. And so working from 8 till 5 or 6 every day in an office away from home, knowing that he might need me at some point, was a huge motivation for me to just start doing something where I felt like I had a bit more capacity and space, where it was more driven by me. Nowadays, because I started my business back in like 2008, nowadays I think there's a lot more room for just about any industry to be able to do that. But at the time, I also wanted to change industries as well. So that was part of the reason why I was so motivated to kind of make the leap and be really brave at that time. So the other thing is, when you have your own business, you have that freedom and you have that space and time to do things the way that you want. But then you realize when things don't go to plan that there's actually more pressure for you to perform than if you had a job. Because if you had a job, you could possibly just take some leave and still be paid, and that's nice. But when you have a business, you can't do that. The good news is though, if you're in control of your income, so a lot of business owners don't think about it like this. They think about it being safer to have a job, but you get to a point in your business where you realize the safety comes from your ability to turn the taps on, and you can be in control of keeping the taps turned on your worst days when you can't do things. I also want to say this is not just about grief. It's about being sick. It's about needing to take time off to have babies, like random surgeries. This applies to all of it. But we have to recognize the impact of life events, and we also have to acknowledge that life doesn't stop lifing just because you have set a goal. In fact, from a manifestation standpoint, I guess, it's not just about, being positive all the time. It's about being able to hold the capacity for things to do whatever they do and still know that it is safe for you and it's okay for you to do what you want. And that's part of the tips that we have here today. That's the first part, recognizing life is gonna life, okay? Second thing is, you have to have self-compassion. It is so, so, so important, not only during tough times, but especially during tough times. So self-compassion actually helps you improve resilience, and it helps you improve decision-making. So when you cannot be compassionate with yourself about things going wrong or not being able to show up or not having the capacity or the energy to work, you're adding this extra, like beating yourself up for not being able to do things on top of the challenge that you're already going through. It is a double whammy, and it's completely useless because there's nothing you can do about the amount of energy you have in that moment except to look after yourself. So self-compassion, it helps regulate your emotions, because instead of beating yourself up, you're being compassionate, you're being humanitarian towards yourself. It's linked to lower levels of stress and anxiety, and you can see why, because if your emotions are more regulated, you will naturally feel less stressed and anxious. It helps improve your decision-making as well and your problem-solving skills, because it gives you a balanced perspective and helps you view things a little bit more objectively. And there is actually research done on this by Dr. Kristen Neff, who's a mindfulness professional. So when you're going through something tough and you feel extra stressed, or you've kind of gone into fight or flight, your nervous system isn't doing the wrong thing. It's just doing its job, right? Because it thinks something is happening. But a side effect of your nervous system going into, say, fight or flight is that your logical thinking is not high on the priority list. Survival is. And so by regulating yourself through having self-compassion, through being compassionate for what you're going through, and I'll give you some practical tips in a moment, you actually can bring your logical mind back online, which means when you're going through it, you can think objectively. You might have to think quickly about certain things. You might have to make practical decisions about whether you're going to do something, not do something. You have to be able to communicate when you're in business. It's very, very important. So the first tip that I have is mindfulness. Try to practice being present. If you're not in practice with this, something really great is like tapping on your body and like tapping your body so you can start to be back in your body, and then looking around and asking, like, what can I see? What can I hear? What can I smell? What can I touch? What am I thinking? Go through all your senses and pick things that you can notice through those senses, and it helps you be present. It helps you look at something in detail and really describe it and just be with it in that moment. I find to really instantly tip me back into self-compassion is to speak really compassionately to myself. Like, it's safe for me to be feeling what I'm feeling. It's safe for me to feel confused. It's okay that I don't know what to do. I'm doing the best I can right now. The amount of time and energy I have is the exact amount of time and energy I need in order to get everything done. That final one is more, it's less kind of self-compassion and more like a way of accessing a better feeling thought in a moment where I might be beating myself up for not having enough energy. So the second part is that self-compassion needs to be the baseline. Okay, now let's move on to setting priorities and boundaries. This is the third part. During a crisis, whether it is that you're involved with other people who are also experiencing a crisis, or you have a business, and I'm going to speak to the business, being able to reassess and set priorities during a crisis is going to be number one, because there are always going to be things that continue to need to be done, but not all of them need to be done, and some of them don't need to be done right now at all. So we need to be able to stop and reassess what we're telling ourselves is essential, what we're telling ourselves is important, and what you will find is 90% of things are not essential in this moment. Once you sit down and you look at everything that you need to do, you need to reassess and set priorities. When this happened for me earlier this year, I was about to start a launch, and in reassessing and setting priorities, I realized I just want to be with my family, and I really pulled back on doing that. I didn't have the energy or the capacity. I wanted to put my energy into being with my family. And that is what felt so right and so good. And I want to send you a little reminder in this moment. What feels right for you? What feels good for you? What feels like you can get your energy behind it, your thoughts behind it? What feels really good, whether it's relaxing or flowing, or just trust that that is going to be the most profitable, joyful, impactful thing that you can be doing in your business right now. So just because you had an idea before this happened about what you were going to be doing that was right, it doesn't necessarily mean it's right now. So reassessing what would feel right and what would feel good is important. Then prioritizing what you need to do. So once you have then prioritized what is most important, what is essential, I would say, everything else can just be done later. It's about then setting boundaries to manage your workload and protect your mental health. Now, what are boundaries? What are boundaries? It's that what you're available for and what you are no longer available for. And I think this is possibly one of the most difficult parts for people to kind of set. But here's what I would do. First of all, you need to be able to communicate those boundaries and what is happening with clients or stakeholders or anyone involved. Be as clear and as specific as best you can. Okay, so when this happened for us in our family, I didn't want to share all of the details, but I actually had calls booked that day. And I'm not available to reschedule on my clients, but it was an emergency. So moment to moment, I just did what felt right. And one day that meant cancelling and rescheduling everything. And another day that was actually showing up to a few calls and informing my clients that there was something going on. And that actually became a really interesting coaching conversation on the call with the salon because, I was going through it in the moment. And I was as precise and clear as I could be in the moment. Sometimes we don't have all the answers. We don't know what to say. We might be in shock. We don't know how to say things. Just be as precise and clear as you can be. So with the clients that I had to move, I said, look, I'm really sorry. I wouldn't normally do this. Something has come up. I can't remember exactly what I said. We've had a family emergency. I need to be with my family, and I will get back to you as soon as I can when I have more information so I know when we can book our next session. And I'm really looking forward to it. Please stay in touch with me if there's anything you need. I'm still here. I just need to go and be with my family right now. And naturally, 100% of my clients were amazing about it. I don't think I have ever had a client be cross with me about going through something, but I know every time I've been like, oh gosh, I'm worried about canceling this or moving it. I've never had a client be upset. I think it would be a major red flag about who you're working with if they were upset for you going through something that was not in your control, okay? So boundaries. The next thing I want you to do is when you think about boundaries, I want you to ask yourself, okay, in order for me to do the things that are most important to me, where am I going to have time for myself to grieve? Where am I going to have time for myself to just be with me and process? Where am I going to have time for me to do self-care, sleep? The things that you need to do. So one of the things that we always say in my group coaching programs is that the things that help you survive are actually the things that help you thrive. What I mean by that is when you're going through a difficult time, we tend to go back to basics. Really nourishing ourselves, really being gentle with ourselves, being slow with ourselves, paying attention to what our body needs in the moment, getting extra rest, making sure that we're getting sunshine and getting water and getting nurtured. Things like that can drop off as we get busier again. So remember, if you've got a really solid practice for taking care of yourself, it's much easier to take care of yourself when things get really hard. But when you have limited capacity, once again, you come back to what is most important for you, and then everything else gets pushed to the side or pushed back or moved around. It's going to take some time for you to sit down and work out what will work, what won't, and that's okay. Give yourself the time to figure that out. Talk to someone, talk to a coach, talk to a trusted advisor or a counselor or a friend about how you can manage everything that needs to happen and what you need to let go of in order to be able to do what is important in that moment. So for me, that meant pushing the launch back, totally fine. Welcoming in more one-on-one clients, loved that. Stopping earlier, making sure that I just have quiet evenings and things like that so there's a time for things to be moved around. And I'll talk more about that in a moment. So number 3 is getting really clear on your priorities and the boundaries, what you are and what you are not going to be available for the next foreseeable future. Number 4, let's talk about some practical strategies now for managing your business. Do you realize we couldn't really get here until we talked about knowing that life events are going to happen, having self-compassion for it, understanding what boundaries are? If you don't have all of that in place, these strategies don't mean anything. Okay, so let's talk about actionable things you can do to keep the business running during personal crises. Now, if you're a solopreneur, this is going to be slightly different to if you have a small team. For me, I've been through it where I've been a solo person with no team and also having a team. So take this and think about it for yourself and how it's going to work for you. So the first thing is, also, some of these tips are going to be things that you might want to start doing now to ensure that you have space later on. And some of them are going to be things that you think, well, that's too late because I'm going through it right now. If you're going through it right now, it's totally okay, but you can potentially start putting some of these things into place right now if you have time. And if not, we'll talk about that too. So the first thing is automating tasks and using technology to sort of streamline your operations. So what that can mean is speeding things up by utilizing things like ChatGPT or whatever to kind of help you with setting boundaries and planning out your day. So one of the things I do every day is I will go into my ChatGPT, which I have taught what it means to me to have a burnout informed schedule. And I'll say, these are the things I need to do. This is when I want to start. This is when I want to finish. And I teach it my requirements. And then I say, I want to do this, and this task. This is how long it takes. Can you make me a schedule? And I'll even say what the priority is, and ChatGPT comes back with a schedule. It's really awesome because at the end of the day, I don't have brain capacity for that. And I get this awesome schedule. So that's one way I use technology to streamline some of my operations. But there's heaps. There are sometimes things we can do, like instead of personally sending invoices, utilizing software that send invoices for us and just automate the process. So think about anything you can automate. Secondly, if you have freelancers or virtual assistants, delegate tasks as early as possible so things are off your plate. You may even have team members that can increase what they can take on while you're going through what you're going through. The next thing is really, I think this is the most important, communicating really transparently with clients about the situation and any potential delays. So if you're in this right now, this is actually just the best place to start. You may not be able to automate, you may not be able to delegate if you're a solopreneur, but using self-compassion, communicating really transparently with the people who are relying on things means that you're giving everyone and everything grace. And part of that self-compassion, something I always tell myself, is that I trust the timing of all of this. And my clients often say the same thing. Okay, so communicating, just setting the boundary. That's actually one of the most practical things you can do if there's nothing else you can do. Again, for future, think about what are the different things that you have in place, like backup plans for when emergencies happen and you still need to run your business. Okay, so think about this. If you were having a wedding outside and there was a potential for rain, you'd probably have a second venue. Do you do this with your work? So something I've done in recent years is I have multiple devices to be able to run my business from. I used to just use a laptop, and that laptop was legendary. But I have since gotten a desktop computer, and my desktop has to be plugged into a power source. Now, I don't know why, but every now and again, Telstra or whoever decides to turn our power off and do some stuff out on the peninsula where I live. And it's so annoying because they'll say it's going to turn off at 9 a.m. and they turn it off guaranteed at 9 a.m. But having a second device means it actually doesn't matter to me whatsoever. If the internet runs out or the internet doesn't work, I always have on my phone lots and lots of data. So I use my phone as my data. So I'm never reliant on external factors like internet and things like that being able to run the business, okay? But you can also explore a business model and a work schedule that supports you to be able to have flexibility in your days and weeks. Once again, if you're in this right now, the self-compassion and communication is going to be what's critical for you. But I want you to think about this because life's going to keep lifing, right? So start thinking about how you can have more flexibility in your days and weeks, how you can have a work schedule and a business model that supports you to be able to have flexibility. Maybe that means that you're selling something that doesn't physically always require you to be present. It's something anyone can buy at any time, and that is income for you, like a course or a product. Or it could just be, the way that you set up your time. So for example, in my business, there's always 1 week every month I do not have any calls booked. And it means that I have time to create, but also it means there's an overflow from if something had to be moved. So there's never a banking up or a bottleneck of clients because there's always this time where things can move. I'm a woman. I'm a woman in business. I'm a woman with inconsistent energy. I don't cancel my clients, but I know that they sometimes need to move things. But also it gives me time where I know there is time to actually relax. So I can push myself for a period of time through the month, knowing that there is a period of rest upcoming. It is so good for you in business. So that's number 4, practical things for managing your business. Part 5 is now leaning on support systems. So having a support system in place, even if it's not a coach, not a mentor, but a therapist or professional networks, places that you hang out and you meet other people who are in similar situations to you. It could be your friends, it could be your family. I really want to encourage you to seek help from the people around you. And if they're not around you, find them online. There's always places that you can go for help. Some of the resources might be counseling, it might be support group, it might be a networking group that you have in your local community. It could be friends, it could be family. For me this year, it's been like friends and family members who I really deeply trust, who aren't like directly involved in what's happened, who can just check in on you and let you know that they're there. And I'm very, very grateful. I mean, they're never not there. They're amazing human beings. Therapy is also really good. It feels funny to go and ask for support for a lot of people. And it also feels weird. Like, what am I going to do? Just rock up to this stranger and like tell them about my life? Like, yeah, what it is a place with someone dedicated to professionally listen and support you, to just let it be what it is without distractions. It is the best. And obviously, being a part of a group coaching program, I'm an absolute advocate for that, obviously, because that's what I do in my work, but that's also really, really, really helpful. And I'm not just saying that as a coach, I'm saying that as someone who participates in these things as well. It's so supportive to have that like real tangible space where you can be going through the stuff and it's part of the process. Okay, so lean on your support systems. Now is the time to do it. Finally, honor what matters the most. It is so important. I can't emphasize this enough, that you take the time to grieve and to heal and to be with loved ones. Don't think that it's not going to help. Don't think that it is weak or something to just stop for a little while and take the time. Trust that what you're going through is what you're supposed to go through. It doesn't take you away from what you're working on. It doesn't take you away from what matters most to you. It actually gets you closer, because this is life being life. So it is so important to prioritize yourself, to give yourself the space. And I want to talk about healthy compartmentalization, because taking the time to grieve means being able to do it without doing it at inappropriate times. And like I mentioned, I mean, you heard me get a little bit teary at the start of the episode probably, because I think these things for a lot of us, like they're not there when you're at work. It doesn't mean you can't show up to work. It's always there. So you can still show up and do things. It's totally okay. And that's what you should be doing. It's what you should be doing, what feels really good. If there's no space for you to actually grieve outside of your work, if you're making yourself so busy, there's no time to just be with the real emotions of it, it comes back later. Like there's no point avoiding it in the moment. It's not something that you can just avoid for a while and then it goes away. It's always going to be there. Does that make sense? So I want to talk about just briefly on balancing business responsibilities with also your personal needs. And this is what I would call healthy compartmentalization. You got to find a balance that works for you to prioritize your well-being. And it might be different day to day. It might be different hour to hour. It might be different week to week. But this is what I would call healthy compartmentalization, which means you can still show up to work, you can still do the things, you can still run your business, and you're not avoiding being with what is. Now, I've mentioned this example already, but one of the things I knew I had to do was I didn't have the capacity to do all the things I was ready to do in January. I just knew that I didn't, and I didn't want to, and it didn't feel good anymore. So for me, healthy compartmentalization wasn't about going, okay, I am just going to compartmentalize and still push through and do all the things. Sometimes I've been able to do that. Honestly, it's different every time. But this time it was like, no, I'm not going to do that. I'm actually going to take things off my plate instead of pushing through and just giving myself the space. So everyone's different. Every situation is different. I want you to know that's what I mean by you have to find the balance that works for you, because sometimes you'll have the capacity to still do everything you wanted to do and compartmentalize, and sometimes you won't. Okay, so the way to do it is set really, really, really clear boundaries. Like I said, plan your days and then set boundaries around when you're going to be working, when you're going to be available for work, and when you are not available for work. So what that means is you've got a start time, you've got a finish time, and you might even have breaks during the day where you can just kind of be with what is. Just pay attention to how much time you need to have that space, and then you can go back to work. Let me tell you, it sounds really weird. It sounds a little bit robotic, but knowing that you have space to rest, knowing that you have space to grieve, knowing that you have space to just be with whatever makes it easy to show up to your work, because you're not trying to push something down. You're not trying to hide something. You're just showing up and doing what feels good. Does that make sense? I hope it makes sense, right? So you're setting really clear boundaries. Okay, I'm going to be doing this and this and this now. So this is when I'm going to be available. All right, next, once again, prioritize your tasks. Your energy may be a little bit lower. Your capacity for what you think you can do may be a little bit less. And again, practice forgiveness and self-compassion for when you can't get it all done. And I have to say, sometimes you think you've gotten through it as well. And then you'll go through a period where you're like, oh, I just feel so drained again or lethargic again. And my clients, they go through this all the time. They're like, I thought I was through it and I'm not through it. And I just want to say, like, have compassion for yourself, because it works in waves and it's okay. And this is how you can still be okay while you're doing life, you know? It's like when you have a baby. I haven't had a baby, but I know for my clients, you know, they're like, okay, I think I've gotten the habit of this, having a kid or having multiple kids and running my business thing. And then one of their kids will get sick or they'll go through like a growth leap and they're like, it's all changed again. And we have to have compassion for the fact that nothing is going to stay the same. So healthy compartmentalization, constantly checking in with those boundaries and prioritization. Okay, the next tip for healthy compartmentalization is increase your self-care massively, however you need to. So that might mean taking breaks. That might mean being in nature. That might mean doing specific things that feel like are really nurturing and nourishing. It could even also be, in fact, I recommend doing more of your hobbies and things that nurture you and regulate you. If you don't have a hobby, start one. Now is a really great time to explore your hobbies. Also, don't ditch exercise. Don't ditch things that make you feel good. Don't ditch the things that keep you in a good mental state. And that is just number one. Still be active, still move your body. It's going to help you in all of the ways. Okay. If you can, also keep a really good sense of humor and laugh at things and talk about things and tell jokes. And just remember that life can be really, really, really challenging sometimes. And there is still space for you to feel joy. There is still space for you to feel happiness and freedom and wellness. It doesn't have to be that you're not allowed to feel anything good anymore. And that's very important. Okay. And then finally, when you are at work, be present and focus on the tasks that you have laid out. You've given yourself time to think about other things. This is a gift of time to think about the things that are most important to you. So then make sure there's time to be with your emotions, but be present when there is time to work. Okay? Give yourself time to just be, to journal, to cry, to do whatever you need. You don't have to force it, and we can't always control it. But once again, when you have that space to process things, it feels a lot better. It's going to be different, I think. For men and women, we also process things a little bit differently. And so, again, take this to be whatever you need. Something that has come up this year, it's actually something that one of my family members told me that someone said to them, just brilliant, is that these things can feel like it's, you know, the end of the world. And it can feel like something that is a fork in the road. I'm going to butcher what he said. I can't remember the exact words, but it was like, it's always a fork in the road. It's something that you get to decide. Is this going to be something that ruins my life? Or is this going to be something that drives me to live my life fully? Is it going to be something that drives me to look after myself and strive to be better? Is it going to be something that changes me for the better or changes me for the worst? And I hope that this podcast and that your life and that the people around you and that you can encourage yourself to decide what this gets to mean for you instead of letting your fear make it mean something that is not helpful. I hope that makes sense. Okay, so they're the 6 kind of biggest things that I have for you. Recognize the impact of life events. Know that life is going to life. Have self-compassion and practice it. Set priorities and boundaries. Set up your business or start applying strategies to manage your business so it can be done on your worst days. Lean on your support systems and honor what matters most by using healthy compartmentalization. The final thing I want to leave you with is this. It's safe for you to go for what you want, to live the life you want, to set goals, to say yes to something wonderful, and to have things go wrong and still have a thriving business and life. Don't set goals or plans with this undercurrent of, I can't afford for this to go wrong. If you're feeling that way from the beginning, it's a red flag. It causes unnecessary stress, and you don't want to start with unnecessary stress. Set your sights instead and set a standard for yourself. to create achievement with space for life to do its thing, and take great care of yourself, because you'll get your goals and realize this goal had nothing to do with this result anyway. It's all about who you become in order to get there anyway. You're doing a great job and I'm so proud of you. Now, I'd love to hear from you. If you have experiences with this and you have something to share, you can send me a response in the comments on my website. You can also post a comment to me, I guess, underneath where would we do this? On Instagram. When I share the podcast, I'd love to hear from you, however. And of course, if you have a question for me, you can reach out and ask that. If you have a question for the podcast, you can do that too. I'll shoot you a link underneath this episode in case you have a question for me. Finally, I want to say thank you so much for being here and listening, and for always just being so encouraging and engaging and letting me know that you are appreciating the episodes and that you are enjoying them. It really gives me so much meaning and so much joy. So I love hearing your questions and I love hearing your feedback. So thank you, as always, for doing that. I want to encourage you to, if you are not a subscriber yet, please subscribe to the podcast. It does good things to help us reach other people. I don't think I've ever asked this maybe, but leave a review. And if you think someone might benefit from it, most importantly, share it with them. Finally, I'll say that next week, I'm opening up the doors to group mentoring with me really, really early to folks who are on the waitlist for my group coaching programs, the Fierce Salon and the Bloom Business Incubator. You can read all about them on the website, but I'm going to say if you join the waitlist now, you get some incredible bonuses if you're thinking about working with me this year and all the way into this time next year. So I'll leave the link for joining the waitlist under here. And once again, thank you so much for listening. You can find me at hayleycarr.tv everywhere, and I'll see you in the next episode. Remember, everything you want is so much closer than you think. Okay, bye.